Do good work is not a label, but a way of living. It is the constant and diligent effort to achieve a new level of excellence in one's own life. It is the hidden inner beauty behind the struggle to achieve excellence. It's not perfect, but imperfect. It is the effort, discipline, and focus that often goes unnoticed. The goal of Do Good Work is to highlight that drive. The guests I have on this show emulate this drive in their own special way. You'll be able to apply new ideas into your own life by learning from them. We will also have one-on-one episodes with me where we'll dive into my own experience with entrepreneurship and leadership. Every episode is designed to provide you with ideas that you can apply and grow in excellence in all areas of your life, business, and career. Awesome. So today we have on the show Elaine Jacques. She is an International Coach Federation certified coach and a medical speech language pathologist. So Elaine focuses on leadership presence, which I love, and leadership development. So Elaine, thanks for being on.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Raul. I'm super excited to be here today.
So before we go into the questions, I do want to start with one opening question, is just defining a little bit more. What is speech language pathology?
Oh, that is a great question. So it is the field that a lot of people know more as speech therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Most people think about, children who can't pronounce their sounds right. And that is the large majority of what most speech therapists do. I don't happen to do any of that. I work in hospitals with adults only, inpatient, not outpatient. I have done both, but that's most of what I do, and my actual focus is more on voice and also on swallowing. So I do actually very little with speech language and cognition, just because in the hospital setting we look at more the swallowing part, because that's something that if you're swallowing not safely, that can actually be something that brings your life to an end. So that's kind of important. So that's most of what I do, but speech therapy does have a pretty broad focus of voice, working with people who are maybe teachers or public speakers on making sure that they take care of their voice. People like Madonna actually have their own speech therapist that travels with them everywhere to make sure that they take care of their voice. So it's a pretty broad question. What we deal with, but that's just a quick overview about.
So anywhere from speech sounds, swallowing, to social communications. Then you also touched on the cognitive as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So with both balancing and working with leaders as well as your medical background, where's the overlap? How does that work together?
So for me, my focus being on leadership presence and leadership development, I focus a lot on the communication piece, which is how do you present yourself very effectively? And that goes into my background of my additional certifications, which includes I'm a conversational intelligence for coaches coach, and I'm also a body language trainer. So I look at the holistic picture of how can I help you with how you say things, both with your body and with your voice, and just the words that you choose. So how you say the things to present yourself the most effectively, to make sure that when you're communicating with your teams, you're doing it in a way that really connects you with them and helps them buy into your message and become more involved in the decisions that are being made, so that they're loyal and they're participatory. So for me, the overlap, I think at first I struggled with how am I doing this? Am I just completely switching careers and throwing everything away? And realizing that actually a lot of the neuroscience that I have participated in learning and just working with patients who have cognitive issues really does apply to people who aren't just in the hospital with critical issues, but also how we communicate with each other and how we connect with each other and how can we do that better. So that's the piece that I sort of bring in. And then, of course, I've added a whole bunch of certifications because I do that. So,
but I think that's actually a core concept, because I've seen it, or even I've experienced it, where as a leader, you say something and then the team hears something else and takes action on that something else. And then you look to yourself like, well, did I say something wrong, or how could I communicate this more effectively? And most importantly, like right now, everything being remote, how do you enhance your communications and still relay the right actions that need to be derived from a core communication piece. So what are some of the things that you're seeing in regards to communicating effectively in today's age?
Well, this is a great question, and I've tried to be really careful to make my posts, my communication with other people very timely,
Mm-hmm.
and really focus on what do we all need right now, and that's being more connective in a world that's very disconnected. The way that you and I are communicating right now is over the internet. We've never met in person, and if we did, we'd have to mask and stay 6 feet away and all of
Yeah.
that. So, how can we be more connective is something that I've focused quite a bit on. How can we have that more effective communication? And how can we touch each other's lives when we can't physically touch each other? So, I actually did a webinar on this a few weeks ago where I talked about, and this is one of the things that I did some work before I joined this conversation with you of making sure my computer is at eye level, because that is something that even just the subconscious perception that your team will have of how you're talking to them. If I'm up above my camera and I'm
Looking
looking
down to
down,
them, right? Yeah.
that is the perception that they have, is you're authoritative,
A
you're
dominant
not
pose.
team
Yeah.
player, you're not connected with them. And a lot of us, laptop is sitting down on the desk and we're looking down in it and we really don't think about that.
Mm-hmm.
But the perception is then my opinion doesn't matter. This is big boss, handing down the edicts from the glass tower. Whereas if we're at eye level, that says I'm a team player, I want to work with you, I want to collaborate, I'm interested in your feedback. And the opposite is also true. If you, for some reason, or sitting down, maybe you're slumped down in your chair, so you're physically below your camera, it gives that concept or the perception in someone else's mind that you're intimidated by them, you don't feel as competent or as
Mm-hmm.
confident in yourself. So it's a really just simple, easy way. And of course, one of the things that I actually talked to you about prior was looking at your camera, making sure that not only is your eye and your camera at the same level, but I'm actually looking at my camera, because if I look down at you at the screen,
Or
then
not
I
even looking
lose
at
contact.
yourself, right, the whole
Yes,
time. Right?
and so it changes the way that someone feels connected to you. Because if I was in person with you, I would be looking at your eyes. So the
Mm.
weird thing about doing these kinds of recordings is if I look down at your eyes, then of course you've now lost that feeling of I'm actually talking to you.
Connectedness. Yeah.
So that connectedness helps to have that effective communication, to make sure that even during this time, people feel like you're actually talking to them. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
little awkward. It's a little bit weird to actually not be looking at the person. I have to kind of perceptually look at you out of the corner of my eye, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. But that helps you in the way you're seeing me to feel connected to me. So that's just a really, I guess, a technical point. But also to one of the things that I'm encouraging the leaders that I work with is at the beginning of conversations to just have a moment of vulnerability, to acknowledge the situation as it is. You don't have to go into, oh my word, this is terrible, I'm like falling apart at the seams, my brains are
Yeah,
coming
that
out
has
my
to
ears.
be like super excessive, right?
Doesn't have
You
to be
can't
super
show that
excessive.
weakness.
Just a little bit of, hey, I'm kind of going a little bit nuts being inside all the time. How are the rest of you doing? It's just
Mm.
a quick statement right at
But
the
real.
that acknowledges that you're going through this with them, because people have the perception, especially, you'll see people on the videos with the fancy backgrounds and everything. You can usually tell they're not really at the beach, but for some
You
people,
can't tell?
I can't. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
thank
I thought that was at the beach. I thought you just did the little sticky notes
For our
for
audio listeners, I'm in the normal office. So.
so yeah, the sticky notes up at the beach on the palm trees. That's a nice touch, Raoul. Um, so it's a way for people to connect and know that they're not the only ones who are feeling the way that they are. One of the things that I've heard the most frequently is people who say, oh my word, my kids are driving me nuts. It's just a quick statement. But, for people who have kids, which neither you nor I do, but for people who have kids, it's a really nice way to say, okay, I'm not the only one. I'm not a terrible parent. And you don't have to go into a whole discussion. Staff meeting doesn't have to last 2 hours while we all gush about everything.
But
But
it
it's
is a buffer time.
Yes, and it's a quick way for a leader to say, I'm in this with you. We're all in this together. And then finishing it up with just a simple statement, something along the lines of, guys, I know this is a bit of a weird time, but I really appreciate you pulling together so that we can still be effective as a team. And I really appreciate each and every one of you. Took me 20 seconds maybe to say
Mm-hmm.
that. And that's really a nice way to be effective with your people. To go back to your other question that you said is how can you be more effective from the standpoint of you say something and then your team goes off and does something completely different.
Yeah.
Well, of course, a great way for leaders to do that is ask for the feedback, ask for what their understanding is. Not is everyone clear on this, because that's a yes, no question, but saying, what questions do you have about what it is that you think that I'm asking you to do? Because I want to make sure we're all on the same page and super clear, because I want to be respectful of your time. Is a great way to kind of check in, and then make sure you hear everyone give what their understanding is, because we all do it. It's called white space. If you don't fill it in, I'm going to fill it in with whatever my understanding is of what you said. And I'm going to go, oh, okay, Raul wants me to do this. And off I go. And you're like, what the hey are you doing out in the field? Yeah. And it's a really nice way just to check in with me. And then I feel respected. I feel like I matter. I feel like I'm valued. And then if I do have a little question, but I'm kind of shy because, hello, I'm an introvert. It's a great way for me to have a chance to know that, okay, before the end of this call, Raul is going to ask every single one of us. So any point of clarity I need, I'm going to have that opportunity. So I don't go off and waste a whole bunch of time doing something in a way that you don't want.
So I want to unpack everything you just right there. So that was really good. So there's 4 main points for our listeners. So the first is pretty much setting the stage. It's almost subliminal, as if you're doing video cameras, especially that looking down upon someone, and also being timid. And if you're just like shy off the camera, like off the lens, that's the one big thing as well, is just being present by the way that you approach your team, in the way that you work. Like, I've worked with remote teams for the last, 4 years now, I think 4 or 5 years, started around 5 years ago, but remote teams for real, like 3 years at least. Haven't met a person. Maybe on and off here in San Diego, but mostly it's online and in camera, right? So that's the first thing, keeping that eye level. The second thing we discussed also, Winston talked about this in one of our previous podcast episodes, that when he goes in front of 1,000 people to help bring change in an organization, in order to be relatable, and I think this also plays into the like people liking you, your like factor, is showing true, authentic. You can't fake it. If you fake anything that we're going to tell you right now, it's going to come off as fake and it's going to go actually against you. But being truly, authentically vulnerable.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a key piece as well. And then appreciating, again, you can't fake appreciation. You could, but it's worse than not giving it. Right. Then the last piece, I think you talked about the feedback, and I've never heard this before, the white space. Right? Like the fill in the blank. If you don't have an active feedback loop, I mean, we talk about feedback loops all the time. If it's within your teams, if it's within, accountability checks or whatever, but I've never heard the white space thing before. Like, if you don't fill it in, they're going to fill it in. And that gap can be, dangerous to your team, to your clients, to the success, and to the overall repeatable, product or service delivery that you're doing.
Absolutely. And it happens in all the relationships in our life with clients. Say I call you as a client and you don't pick up, and I leave a message and you don't call back. Well, that's white space for me. Whether or not you intend it,
so
whether or not
loop,
it's an open loop. I say, oh, Raul's not getting back to me. And what does our brain do? Our brain doesn't typically go and find something positive. Our brain goes into that protective mode of, what's
something
going on?
Must be wrong, right?
Something must be wrong.
Reason why that's interesting too.
He's hiding something. Like, is he not doing the work that I gave him to do? Our brain goes and searches for all of this stuff that's typically not positive. The same thing happens with, I had a leader that I worked with who was sitting in an audience. One of his team was presenting. This is, of course, pre-COVID. And he's sitting there, and he started thinking, while his team was presenting, he started thinking about something else. And for a moment, he leaned forward, kind of put his hand on his chin, on his knee, and sighed. That's all he did. And people in the audience around him equated that with what was going on stage, not recognizing that, this guy's under a lot of stress. He's got a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people didn't know that his mother was very sick, and he was just kind of thinking about that. And for one moment, he let himself relax. But as a leader, everything you do is on stage. We have, actually, it's one of the benefits of COVID right now, is there's a lot you can do when you're not on camera that people aren't scrutinizing and filling in white space gaps on. And for him, he had numerous ones of his team come up and, oh, you're really not happy about this idea? Like, oh, what's going on? You seem very distressed. He's like, distressed? What are you talking about?
Oh, it's
And
interesting,
it
right?
took someone saying, you leaned forward and you sighed at this key moment. They equated it with what was going on stage. And we don't feel like you're really on board with this idea. And you seemed very excited. And he's like, oh my word, I was thinking about my mother. But because he hadn't shared that particular piece with his team, there was that white space and they filled it in. And
Mm.
he was very lucky that there was someone, close enough to him
You
to be able
shortened the
to.
feedback loop essentially
Yes,
there.
yes, exactly. And so for him, he had a little bit of work to do of,
Mhm.
backing that up and saying, no, 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 that was not a thing. Hey guys, just want to let you know, I have this, being that little bit vulnerable. I have this thing going on with my mom, just appreciate you guys being a little extra patient with me and really excited about what's going on, and filled in that white space, erased the stuff that they had filled in. And everyone's like, oh, great boss, praying for you, the whole thing. And it was fine.
Mm.
But it's interesting that the white space exists in every relationship. I like to use the example of it's a stereotypical female thing that, a guy says, hey, is everything okay? And she's like, it's fine. And, most guys on the planet are like, oh my word, something's wrong. And it may actually be fine, but the white space that you fill in is, it's not fine. There's something wrong. What did I do? Oh dear. And you start going through your mind, stereotypical guy, this is just stereotypes,
Yeah,
but
it's stereotype, yeah.
it's that stereotypical is the personal example of filling in white space. She may have meant it's fine and she's thinking about something else. Or she may have meant it in the stereotypical way of, oh, you're so in trouble and you're going to get it.
Is there
But
a
you won't
reason
know until you close that gap.
until you close the loop? And no, that makes a lot of sense. Is there a reason why? I mean, we can control it. Obviously, we can control the way that we approach those kind of questions. But is there a reason why we go directly to the negative? Is it because we're trying to find something different in our environment and see if there's something to be afraid of, like flight or fight, or?
I think there's a lot of postulation about this, but I think
Mm.
it's people say it's the primitive brain, is the amygdala that says you have to protect because the thing that's going to come out of the cave is the saber-toothed tiger. I like to think we're more involved with that, more evolved than that, but sometimes I think our brain just typically is a little bit pessimistic about
Yeah.
what's going on. And I think we can learn to train our brain to not do that. But I think sort of that immediate gut reaction is this going to kill me? Is this going to hurt me? Am
Mm,
I
yeah.
going
I
to
mean,
be
yeah,
able
that
to
makes
go
sense.
out and harvest and catch something, and more primitive? I think is the hypothesis about where that comes from. But
Well,
certainly
I
it's
mean,
something
I
worth
wrestle
thinking.
saber tooths for lunch, so I don't know if that's
See,
primitive.
yeah, yeah. So you're aware that you do need to be extra careful to watch where
Yeah.
the teeth end is.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that carries on to the next question I really wanted to hit on is, so there's communication obviously that we do externally, and the way that we present ourselves as leaders, and I talk about that actually in the book. That the chapter is literally called "Setting the Stage," or the section. As leaders, you set the stage for your team, your environment, the way that you talk, the way that you behave. And obviously, we're all human, so there has to be those points of vulnerability. You're not going to be perfect 100% of the time because no one expects you to. But then there's also that we just touched on a little bit, and I want to know more about your insights, with your medical background, but the language that we give ourselves and the stories we tell ourselves, right? So how we're all as leaders working to achieve some sort of excellence or some success, right? And I think that we all have a potential, and the this is, again, I think I'm going into the theory land here, but my specific view is that you can't increase your own potential. You can reach it though, but we also have the possibility of not reaching that. So, with your work that you've done in your experience, how can we seek to maximize as much as we can, reaching to our potential through language?
And that's a really beautiful question, and I love it that you asked that, because that's something that is so fascinating to me. That the words we use make such a big difference, and they've done functional MRIs on presenting various images to people and hearing various messages and what happens in our brains. And I've never stuffed someone in an MRI, but there have been times where I'm like, ooh, super nerdy. I want to see what's happening in your brain. So instead I have to communicate and just ask you. But it's the interesting thing. And I've been very careful about the way I have talked about the time that we're in. And I've talked about this on a couple of other shows that I've been on, is that if I say, I'm terrified, and
Mm-hmm.
I make the look and I have that tone and that word that I have chosen, I have now bathed my brain in cortisol, which is the stress hormone. So
Mm.
that will have a residual effect on me for a certain length of time, actually. And me as a woman, that actually lasts longer than the stereotypically the average guy. That just me making that statement, I'm going to feel slightly higher blood pressure for a while. I'm going to feel a little bit more anxious just having done that. And if instead I say, you know what, it's a little uncomfortable for me right now, not knowing about what's might happen and when the end of this is going to come and those kinds of things, I'm much calmer. My
Mm.
face is calmer, my tone is calmer, just the difference in the words that we describe. So I've actually been very careful to not use the word pandemic, because that's a frightening word for most people. Most people don't know what that means. It carries a lot of unknown and scary and everything. So I typically, and some people have said, oh, you're diminishing the importance of this time, but I will say this time of current health concern.
Yeah.
That's something that, people know about health. They know about what the word concern is. I say it in a calm tone, so I'm not adding to the problem. So to kind of shift it just a little bit away from COVID, the way that we speak to ourselves
Mm-hmm.
is so important, because it's an indication to ourselves what we're thinking about, what we're emphasizing to ourselves. And I like to use the example of, would you be friends with you if if someone else talked to you the way you talk to yourself? And for
Mm.
most people,
And
the
at
answer
first,
is
having that
no.
self-awareness of
Yeah,
how you talk to yourself matters. Yeah.
exactly. We give a lot of grace. We give a lot of forgiveness to other people.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to do something, maybe a little silly, maybe not the most insightful, I'd be like, oh, Raul, you know what? You've been under a lot of stress lately. It's all good. I do the same thing. And I'm like, oh my word, how could you do that? The tone is
Mm.
different. The
More
emphasis is
strict, right?
different.
Yeah.
Oh, very, kind of flog, flog, flog.
Yeah.
Making our journey harder for ourselves by the way we talk to ourselves makes such a huge difference, because you carry that. It's like a
Mm-hmm.
wound you keep inflicting if you don't speak kindly to yourself. And the reverse is also true. If you speak gently to yourself, if you say, you know what, that was possibly not the most insightful thing, what can I learn from that? Well, that's much more grace and much more forgiveness to yourself. And that's what you would do for somebody else. And that's one of the things that I really encourage people to do right now, is to say, it is super important how you talk to yourself. I was talking to someone the other day who said, oh my word, I'm so stupid. And I said, I'm going to ask you
Yeah.
to change just one little bit. What I did wasn't smart, not I am stupid. I am says that's an inherent
That's
part
a
of you.
personality characteristic versus the
Yes.
actions
Yes.
separated from the person.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So to say I am a failure is very self-flogging, is very self-abusive. To say that was not smart, that was a mistake, puts it out here. You can be responsible for that, but it's something you can fix. Whereas if you take ownership and make that part of who you are, is
Mm-hmm.
you are a failure,
It'd be dangerous.
yes,
Yeah.
because that impacts whether or not, to get back to your question, whether or not you're going to achieve your potential. Because if what you're telling yourself is, I am a failure, I am stupid, versus
You're gonna believe it and
you're
then
going to believe it.
find
And
isn't it we look for things in our environment to prove
yes,
ourselves right.
yes, yes. And that was actually what I was going to say is, from a neuroscience standpoint,
Yeah.
whatever task you give your brain, it will go out and find support for whatever
Really.
decision you have made. So if you say, I'm stupid, or let's use a nicer example. Let's say you get up and you have kind of a little bit
Well,
of a
let's say
crack.
I'm a dummy. Sometimes I say that was stupid, and I mean, it's like an instinct at some point, right? So let's use that one.
Okay. So I was going to use a nicer one, but
You use it, and me. I'll be the example for this one.
okay. So we're going to use a nicer example, because I really have an aversion to saying the I am stupid one. So let's say you get up and you stumble out of bed and you fall and you bonk your head on the wall and you're like, oh my word, this is going to be the worst day ever.
Yeah.
Your brain is going to go and look for everything that goes wrong all day long, and it's going to feed that to you. It's going to be like,
This
oh,
was the worst day
you
ever.
forgot your keys, you didn't pick up your cell phone, like you parked too close to somebody and they almost scratched your car. Whereas if you get out of bed and you're like, oh my word, I'm a little bit clumsy today, this is going to be a super fun day. Let's see how much fun this is going to be. Then your brain's like, oh my word, look, you almost forgot your phone, but you didn't.
Mm-hmm.
You almost hit somebody in the parking lot, but you didn't. Like, whew, what an amazingly funny, silly day this is. Your brain will go out and find the information, the data to support any decision you have made, including, are you smart? Are you stupid? Are
Mm.
you good looking? Are you anything that you tell yourself? Your brain's going to be like, oh, okay, all right, let's support that hypothesis. Let's make it a theory.
And
And
that's super interesting because I think that I mean, I know for myself, like if I drop a weight on my foot, I'm like, oh, that was dumb, right? But I feel like we've trained ourselves to have that quick response to negative things that happen. So there has to be a training out of it, right?
yes, yes, yes. And that positive mindset you can do, but it requires building a habit, just like with any other habit. It requires, instead of saying, I am stupid, to say, okay, stop. That wasn't the most insightful thing I've ever done. What can I learn from it? How can I grow through that and become a smarter person, a better person, an even more amazing person, which is my little tagline.
I like that.
It's, you can change it, but it has to be that stop, hold on. I wouldn't say that to somebody else. How would I respond to somebody else? And then turn that to yourself and speak kindly to yourself, because we're all trying our best and we're super willing to say that to our best friend.
Mm-hmm.
We talk to ourselves more than anybody else on the planet because we're with ourselves all the time. So why not talk as nicely as we do to other people? Because I think we deserve it too.
That's an interesting question that you raised right there. Going back to the exercise of the practice, I would say, even for myself, maybe journaling about it, right? Like, what is the sentence that you said and what's the positive response to that sentence? But I think, I read, have you read the book Willpower?
Oh, I don't think I have.
So it's tying it back to some of the neuroscience that we have more willpower in the morning or when we have more energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's tied back to energy, to food, to like if you've done. Funny enough, I was listening to this book while I was running a half marathon, so kind of funny.
Nice.
I was depleted the more that I was listening to the book. But the key thing is, like, what have you seen when it comes to making these active cognitive decisions and actually working on yourself? I would suggest doing those earlier in the day when you have that willpower, as opposed to 9 o'clock at night before you sleep, because you're hungry, you're tired, or you just you want comfort, I would say.
I would agree with that, but I would add to it just one little step. Absolutely. Morning is a great way to set the tone for your day. You can get up, and before you stand up and fall down, you can say, I'm going to have a great day. I'm going to make this an even more amazing day than yesterday. I am going to be the best version of myself today.
Mm-hmm.
You can set the tone for your day, because what have you just given your brain the task to do? Go out and find support for that. And that's awesome. The one thing I would add to it is there is a lot of research that's been done about what are the last thoughts that you have before you go to sleep. And I would say, if you like to journal, have written down those things in the morning, those positive statements that you make to yourself. People call them affirmations, if that works for you, is to reread them again before you go to sleep. Because then you set the tone for how well are you going to sleep and what are you going to have remembered from your day. Instead of ruminating over all the things that you did that weren't perhaps the most insightful, you're then refreshing in your mind all the things that you did to make your day even more amazing, to be the best version of yourself. You're giving your brain that task to say, as I go to sleep, remind me of everything I did well today. And then you're going to sleep better, which sets you up for an even better day tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that's a small habit that compounds, like, to a bigger snowball effect.
Yes.
Significantly. I like that. I like that a lot. I think one key distinction too, though, and I have to say this because I am the skeptic, is that when we're talking about these kinds of things, when it talks about affirmations or whatever you want to call it, it's training your body and your mind, kind of like you would train a muscle, right? Obviously, the mind is more than a muscle, clearly, but the thing is, it's not being delusional about reality. I think it's facing reality as it is, but in a better way, like actually coming prepared to it. And I think that's an essential tool that is necessary for leaders to really face the tough questions. Because, like, if you earlier in our conversation, we talked about leadership and everyone's watching you and you set the stage, and like, it's a lot of pressure, right? Not everyone wants that. It's not easy. And that seems like, oh, it's a silly example, but even making difficult decisions, like, who's going to be let go, or why this person needs to have a talking to, or how we're
Right.
going to shift, different conversations. And it's going to affect people's lives or businesses or their, income potential, whatever it is, right? So
Absolutely.
it's facing that reality, I think, like you just mentioned, in the best possible form.
Hmm.
And if you don't think like I shouldn't do it for myself, well, what about those that are affected by the actions that you perform? So I think that it's any leader should take it seriously of how they show up. And I think that's even a cliche, how you show up, but it's like how you decide to address your reality or the reality that you live through with others around you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you've drawn that out, because the way that we show up makes a difference how we interact with other people, how we're perceived on that subconscious level. And I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely agree. I will tell you, 16 years working in the hospital, I'm not fluffy Pollyanna. You can come to me and be like, "Oh, I heard this great thing." And I'm like, "Where's the research that supports that?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't just, "Oh, okay, new idea. Okay, let's go with that." For me, it is definitely, it's supported by a lot of research that the way we speak to ourselves, the way we show up, the way we are present makes a difference in our brain, and that connection between each other that happens. It's called a mirror neuron response. If I smile at you, you're more likely to feel a smile, but only if it's a true smile.
Huh.
If you show me a picture stuffed into an fMRI machine, which
Uh-huh.
I can promise you I won't feel very positive about, but if you show me a picture of a fake smile where I only smile in the lower half of my face, my brain will not light up at all.
Really?
Whereas if you show me someone who has little crow's feet showing and everything, they actually feel it in their brain. They will feel that positive oxytocin. I like to call it the connection hormone, because that's way more professional than the cuddle hormone. But it's that connection that we feel with another person. Well, the same thing is if a leader comes to you and they need to have a difficult conversation with you, if they have true empathy, if they're not looking around and their body language isn't showing that I'm really not in this, or I really don't want to be here, if they show you that they're truly present, the way you take in that information will be much kinder than if the boss, the leader, is not really there and they're treating this as, oh, just got to get this over with.
Mm.
Just that difference. It's the quote by Maya Angelou is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really big one.
Yeah.
There's a little fun research study, because I am a nerd, where they showed just doctors talking. They didn't let you hear what they were actually saying. They actually masked it so you couldn't tell, it didn't make any sense. But just the tone, they could tell with, and I don't remember, but it was 90+% accuracy, whether or not the doctor was going to get sued for the bad news that they were delivering.
Wow,
Just based
really?
on the tone and the body language that they were using, whether or not the person was going to receive this as in, I'm really sorry, there's been this medical mistake, and whatever.
Wow.
Just that difference of, if the doctor showed that they actually cared, they were much less likely to get sued. And that holds true for us as leaders as well, because I've unfortunately been in the position where I've had to let people go. I've had to have some of those difficult discussions because I used to be in human resources, and it makes a difference. It really does make a difference how we show up, whether or not we're present, and whether or not we show that we care about the other person as a person, rather than just, you're something I have to check off my to-do list for today.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like going back to, it's not the what, it's the how.
Yeah.
And the how is the arts, the how is the soft
Yes.
skills.
Yes. Yes.
I
Yeah.
love that. Well, Elaine, I think I could have gone on for another 30 minutes here with you. I actually have one more question,
Okay.
because I'm actually pretty I'm very curious. So not to gamify this, but to gamify it. It sounds like we're after specific hormones and trying to decrease specific hormones. Can
Mm-hmm.
you list out some of the most important ones that affect the way that we show up? We talked about cortisol, we talked about oxytocin. What are some of the ones that we should be going after? Not like a game, but some that we can improve in our daily lifestyle, and how to decrease, the ones that we don't want.
Well, obviously, those two that we've already talked about, those are the big ones. Your fight, flight, response with the cortisol is a big one. How you talk about things, how you choose to view things will make a big difference. And recognizing that it's not just, oh, I said the thing earlier about being terrified and now I'm totally fine. there is actually a chemical residual response, like they call it the half-life, that will reside in my brain for a certain portion of today, simply because of that little example I gave you. So being very, very mindful of, when we get excited about something, to say, I'm going to choose my response, because not only will this impact me for a certain length of time, it will also impact the person I'm talking to.
The receiving, yeah.
The receiving end of it, because of that mirror neuron response. Is if I act stressed, then you feel more stressed. And the residue of that takes a while to filter off. So if I say, let's take a moment, let's take a deep breath, I'm going to pause, I'm going to close my eyes, whatever it is that you do to calm yourself, to not share that with your team, that's a gift that's not only for that conversation, but for that half-life experience of the cortisol in your brain thereafter.
Interesting. Do you know how long that takes? Is it dependent on the level, right?
Or it does. Okay. Obviously, if I get attacked, someone's holding me at knife point and the whole thing, and that experience lasts for a while, that's going to impact me for a lot longer. That's and not to diminish anyone's experience, but that's the reason for the PTSD response, that there are residual effects, that little things trigger that over time. Yeah. So it is very dependent. What I said earlier is probably not going to impact me for days and days. I'm probably not going to hear someone else say terrified and feel the same level again, but it is actually longer for women. There's a lot of stuff about why that's the case, but we're very connected in our brains about a lot of different things. But for men, you guys in general stereotypically tend to be more compartmentalized, and so you can hold that into a certain space. We get off the call, and that kind of encapsulates it, and it drifts off a lot faster for you. So there have been research that shows that a difficult conversation can affect a woman up to 24 hours. Oh, wow. As far as the cortisol levels. I've heard 17. I've heard less than that. I think it's very, I'm going to say dose dependent, not to talk about it like it's a medication, but I think it depends on how long, how intense, how long it takes to drift.
So it exists, and being aware that it has any action or any word or any conversation will have its after effect.
Exactly. And the same thing is I, every once in a while, because again, I'm a total nerd, I do these sort of social experiments where I'm waiting in line and I see that the checker is very stressed out. And when I get up there, I ask them how they're doing. I look at them and I smile to my eyes. I don't care that I'm super irritated that I've been in line for all this time. And then I see, how much does that change? And then sometimes I've even just kind of drifted around the store a little bit as I go out to hear, does it change the way that checker responds to the person after me? And if you do it, it is a really fun experiment. But if you do it, you're going to hear the difference. For most people, just you smiling and for one moment saying, you're important, you matter, you are valuable, even though there's been 10 crabby people in front of me and there's probably 10 crabby people behind me, they will hold that good feeling. And that residual effect lasts as well, which is awesome. And so as far as gamifying, smile at somebody else and make sure you smile to your eyes. Make sure that these muscles are activated, because if you don't, they feel nothing.
It's fake. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's totally fake. And that piece of research alone was being shown a fake smile in an fMRI machine. Your brain's like, meh, nothing, like zero. Wow. Nothing. And you show them a real smile and it like lights up in the happy center of your brain. And I think that's super cool. So that's something that you can give to somebody. You can either give them stress, or you can give them that sense of like, oh, my day is better. I don't really know why, but my day is better. So smile at a stranger, smile at your team, make sure it reaches your eyes. Find a way to help them smile, even if it's a tiny thing, make an appropriate joke, find a way to help someone else smile. And that residue
and even
not a very nice word, but that residue will last.
It comes out, and then the team absorbs it. And there's also some research that happier team members are more productive too. So even if you want to say, well, I don't have to smile, that's not going to equal anything to my P&L, that's the way you're thinking. Yeah, it does actually. It really does impact your bottom line. But
so one of the things that's just popped up for me that I'm going to tell you really quick is, years ago, I attended a customer service seminar about how to do that better. That was important to my role at the time. And they said, one of the best things that you can do is, when you get on a call and you hear someone's very angry, to think of 3 things that have nothing to do with you, that's why they may be upset. And so I would be like, your baby barfed on you and now you have baby barf on you. Or your boss yelled at you this morning and now you're yelling at me. Or you had a flat tire on the way to work and everything has spiraled from there. And that helped me so much to be able to sort of deflect some of that and not take it in and ingest
And
that
absorb it into
cortisol, if you
yourself.
will, to be able to say, this has nothing to do with me. And then, of course, you know what I'm going for here is that soft skill of empathy, of you can reach around this angry in your face and you can say, this person is hurting or this person is stressed. How can I help them feel better and not take it in and not get defensive? Like, hey, this isn't my fault. Like, hello, I just got here too. You know, that doesn't help. And so to reach around that, and I will tell you that one piece alone, 16 years in the hospital setting, has been so helpful to me because I walk into a room and frequently I am the next face that they see after they've had a morning full of painful procedures and nasty medications and all of this thing. I walk in the room, I'm your speech therapist. I'm here to see how you're swallowing today. And comes ripping out like dragon fire. And I'm like, you know, and I could get very upset.
Yeah.
But I say, wow, you know, you've had a tough day today. Is there anything that I need to know before we get started? And I will tell you, it's like, oh, fire extinguisher, you know, the fire goes out. Oh, she cares. You know, sometimes it's, you know, have you eaten today? Can I bring you something to eat before I work with your relative here? And sometimes that's the biggest difference is they just feel that I care. And it
That's
doesn't matter.
dramatic.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's actually, but I feel like I would forget, but then I think reminding myself to do that to make, okay, cool, remain your cool, keep calm and help out better. Because, and I think again, goes back to habit, right?
Yes.
Practice.
Oh, and that has been something that I've had to train myself to do. Because let me tell you what, you get to the end of your workday working in the hospital and you've had 8 highly stressful conversations. You go walking in that last room and you're a little bit like, okay, what's this one going to be like? You know,
Like you're flexing the whole time, right?
Yes, you have to train yourself to say, you know what, if I were in their shoes, how would I want to be treated? And just force yourself to be present, have that moment outside the room of like, okay, if that was me inside the room, no matter what's going on, how would I want to be treated? And then walk in and be that person and show up for them that way.
I love everything that we talked about isn't something extraneous or super difficult to do. Everything that we talked about, I feel like I could just do like with practice. And I think our listeners can also have action items here. Well, Elaine, for our listeners to thank you for this episode, where can people reach out to you?
I always like to say you can find me on LinkedIn, you know, the LinkedIn/IN/Elaine Jacques all squished together, and you look for the red hair and the big smile and you'll know you found me.
Awesome.
So
Thank you so much, Elaine.
Thank you. This has been so much fun, Ro.